First, what I would like to do is acknowledge and respect the Algonquian-speaking people on whose territories the University of Victoria stands, and the Wassanich and Songhees people whose relationship with the land continues to this day. And I would like to say that I am a settler and a new migrant here at the University of Victoria, that I've lived here for a number of years, and I'm very happy to live here. I love living on the islands. Every time I travel, I see the islands from the sky, and I always think it's so beautiful and reminds me how lucky I am to be here. So we have two speakers today. They are both professors in France at French universities. Both of them are specialists of cross-border regions. They have studied cross-border regions, both of them, for more than 20 years. And they're going to talk to us a little bit about multi-level governance and how it has worked, and some of the impact of COVID and some of the impact of Brexit. The first one is Bernard Reitel. He's a professor of political and urban geography at a university in northern France called Artois University. And he's also the director of a research unit which studies discontinuity. I'm actually not sure what discontinuity means, but it has to do with the changes in territory or urban geography, in changes of a space, right? And so he's also a Jean Monnet Chair of EU and European integration, on border and European integration. And he has published numerous books and articles on the topics that I just highlighted. Brite Wassenberg is a historian, and she teaches at a political science institute in Strasbourg, at the University of Strasbourg, which is just on the border of France and Germany. And her specialty, and she's renowned worldwide for her work that she's done on the Council of Europe, but she has published also massively, and I cannot count even the number of books that have come out of her work and leadership in scholarship on various aspects of European integration, mostly focusing on cross-border regions and the relationship across internal and external borders of Europe. She teaches in different places as well, like the College of Europe in Bruges. Now, with that, maybe we all take a few seconds to introduce ourselves, and we can start online. And I suggest that we start with Faith Matenge, who is online. Faith, do you want to take the floor and introduce yourself, please, just very briefly? Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Good morning, good evening. My name is Faith Matenge. I'm a customs practitioner with about 19 years of experience. Currently, I'm based at the Regional Office for Capacity Building, WCO, and my interests are in trade facilitation and international trade, specifically including border management. So it's a joy to be a part of this fellowship program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Faith. Then we go to Jafet. Jafet, please take the floor.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Jafet Chiraza. I'm from Zimbabwe. I work for the Zimbabwe Revenue Authority. I'm a trainer in podcast communication. I'm also a researcher in the policy and trade, including border management. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jafet. Then we go to Tatiana Shaban.
Good morning, good evening to everyone. I'm Tatiana. Currently, I'm in Minsk, Belarus, and I studied my PhD at the University of Victoria, and I completed my thesis on EU regional cooperation and governance of its eastern neighborhood, with Emmanuel as one of my supervisors. So thank you. And I continue to work with a big team on eastern neighborhood and borders.
Okay, let's go in the room. Avani, do you want to start?
Yeah. Good morning, good evening. I'm Avani. I'm from Sri Lanka. I work for the Department of Sri Lanka Customs. I'm a customs officer. Currently, I work with the Directorate Coal Industries and Services. I'm the officer in charge of one of the units attached. So I'm really looking forward in this course and coming course because I'm expecting to complete microcredit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Edison, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Edison Provini. I'm from Brazil, currently as a deputy coordinator, Brazilian Customs, and also in charge of the technical committee #2 in Mercosur that is responsible for customs issues and trade facilitation.
Thank you so much. David?
Hello, everyone. My name is David Monty. I'm the head of a business in Vancouver, a digital development agency. We work with the University of Victoria and several other international clients in a related space. I'm here to learn more about context and the background for some of the work.
Okay, and that's all we have in class for now. So the floor is yours. Take us away, Bernard and Birte. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Okay,
Okay.
Bernard, you make the PowerPoint.
Yes. Do you see the PowerPoint?
Forward. So what we would like to do for you today with Bernard is to give you an overview on the development of cross-border cooperation in Europe, which we have called a multi-level governance of cross-border cooperation, because what is specific, as you're coming from all sorts of different areas in the world, what I think is very different in Europe is that we do have, when we do cross-border cooperation, we do have in Europe an interplay with different levels of governance, which go from the local and regional level of local authorities to the national level of the states, up to the European level. And when we say European level, it's the EU level. So in order to show you this, we would like to introduce, let's say, the history and the development of this very special cross-border cooperation in Europe. Bernard?
Yes, okay. So here are two short quotes about cross-border cooperation, okay? And how can we interpret these two quotes? First of all, cross-border cooperation is a particular form of international relationship between stakeholders, between actors established on both sides of a national border, but according to a logic of a geographical proximity, a short distance. This assumes that the actors in the cross-border region share sometimes common concerns linked to the presence of the border, traffic, cross-border workers, management of physical environments like mountains, lakes, rivers, and proximity means that the actors can meet regularly to discuss problems, find common solutions, and plan for the future. It's a kind of foreign policy because it involves relations between authorities located in neighboring countries, and you have different legislation and policies on both sides of the border. We can therefore speak of a form of micro-foreign diplomacy, and Birte analyzed this very well in several articles. And micro, because it involves players working on a local and regional scale. That's why they find themselves in a proximity logic. They are not far from the border, and the players are not far from each another. When we speak about Europe, we think, of course, about a geographical area, as you can see on this map, but also we are speaking about several institutions or frameworks. The first one is the European Union, the 27 countries that make up the which are represented here in blue, which is in fact the single market. And on the other side, you have the Schengen area, the areas, the countries which are surrounded by the red line. 26 countries between which there is a free movement of people. It is, in fact, in this region of the world, which is characterized by the presence of small countries compared to other part of the world, that the cross-border cooperation we are talking about has three characteristics. So there are three important matters. One of the diversity, dynamics, and difficulties. Diversity means that situations vary in intensity and involve two or sometimes more players, usually institutional. It can be more or less formalized. In some cases, it's simply informal. In others, it is simply an association of players, but there are also legal frameworks that provide a foundation and enable the cooperation to be established over time. The second matter is dynamics. And here we can speak about the Interreg programs, which were programs initiated by the European Commission in the late 1980s, and which have been part of the European Union policy since 2007. These programs have contributed to this harmonization. Okay? They do not only provide funding, but they also lay down rules to ensure similar cooperation practices. And the third matter is difficulties, because contrary to what has sometimes been said, the creation of the single market does not mean that the national borders of member states have disappeared, but that their functions have changed. There was a distinction between two border regimes: the internal borders of the EU member states, so the border between the states on which controls have normally disappeared, and the external borders of the EU, those with the rest of the world. However, internal borders continue to mark political, legal, and administrative differences between member states, despite the existence of a European legislation. So here is the plan we will follow for our presentation, and I will now give the floor to Brite Wassenberg.
Yes, thank you, Werner. So as a historian, I'm very pleased to be able to give you a historical overview of the development of cross-border cooperation in Europe from after the end of the Second World War. We could actually retrace cross-border cooperation even further back into history, because it's not really something that definitely just started after the end of the Second World War. We can find, for example, alongside the Rhine here between France and Germany, already relationships between chambers of commerce during the interwar period, which is really interesting because they sometimes have relations that contradict national foreign policy. So it's already a kind of small foreign policy. But what we want to show you with Bernard is how this cross-border cooperation after the end of the Second World War coincides, in fact, with the process of European integration. And this is because the objective after the Second World War of cross-border actors on the local and regional level in Europe, and basically mainly in Europe on the continent, at the, I would say, at the borders between the founding member states of the European Community, which were France, Germany, the Benelux states, and Italy, and particularly France and Germany. The idea was to overcome the border not only as an obstacle in terms of crossing, but also in terms of a mental obstacle, because between France and Germany, relationships beforehand have been marked by the war, and so there is a mistrust or even a hatred between these populations, and the idea is to contribute to reconciliation. And so cross-border cooperation is kind of a contribution on the local level to what the states initiate at the same time in the 1950s on the international or European level, i.e. when they set up the European Community. On the ground at the border, of course, the scars, as we say, of history are much more profound, and it is a very challenging task to for the local authorities to bring together the population, which does not necessarily want to cooperate with each other at the time. What we can say is it is still a bottom-up reconciliation process. And I would like to present you here the first European Euregio, which has been set up at the border between the Netherlands and Germany. You can see this on the map here. It's in Gronau, is the center of this Euregio. It's a Euregio which has been set up by local communities, by communes on each side of the border. And it's called the Euregio Gronau. And the innovation of this Euregio was it was set up in the form of a private association, and that's because local authorities are not authorized, of course, to conclude state treaties, and since they have not the authorization to practice foreign policy, so the only legal tool that they can use is an association. And that's what they did. And what you can see here is that this Euregio was set up in 1958, and 1958 is also the date of the entering into force of the European Economic Community, which was following the Treaty of Rome in 57. And in fact, there is a link between the two processes, because one of the founders of the Euregio Gronau, Walter, was actually Alfred Moser, was actually somebody working for the first European Commission, and he had the idea to transpose the reconciliation process operating in Brussels for the European Community to the border regions between the Netherlands and Germany. So this is the first Euregio. It has been formalized from the start, and in fact, you can see at the border, at the town of Gronau, they used the former installation of the customs facilities in order to actually put a common secretariat there. So we have a really institutionalized form of cross-border cooperation at local level from the start. Bernard, you can, the second Euregio, which was created, which I think is also an excellent example to show you this bottom-up process of reconciliation, is the so-called Regio Basiliensis, which was set up in 1963 in Basel. You can see it here on the map in the south. It's the area around the town of Basel. The origin of this cross-border cooperation are very specific. Here we have economic actors who push actually in Basel the stakeholders in the town to set up an association in order to be able to expand the dynamic town of Basel, and especially the chemical industry. They needed to expand on the German and French side because geographically they were cut off from the rest of Switzerland by the Alps, by the mountains, and so the only possibility of an dynamic expansion of the town in terms of space planning was, of course, the German and the French side. So you can see it's a very pragmatic approach. But the founders of the Regio Basiliensis still, when they set up this Euregio, which is also a private association, and they invite French and German stakeholders to join them, and it's stakeholders from the town of Freiburg and from the Chambers of Commerce of Mulhouse and the Département in Mulhouse, so local and regional stakeholders on the French side. The idea is not only to look into, well, what can we do for transport, for better transport, what can we do for cross-border workers, how can we improve the airport, which is a Franco Swiss airport, in order to expand economically the town. No, you can also find in this association, you can actually find, it's very interesting in the archives, you can find working groups on cultural cooperation and on, for example, education. They wanted to set up a European school in Basel, and they actually wanted to actively contribute to a reconciliation between France, Germany, and Switzerland. And I always say, because 63 is not an innocent date either, it's the date of the Treaty of Friendship between France and Germany, which was signed by Adenauer and de Gaulle, the two heads of state, France and Germany, 1963. And you see at the same time, we have on the local level this Euregio, but this Regio Basiliensis, it's almost as if you needed a Swiss mediator in order to be able to practice reconciliation on the ground. Now, the cross-border, to show you the diversity of cross-border cooperation, we wanted to also show you another area in Europe, which is the area in the Nordic states, the Scandinavian area. And here we also find cross-border cooperation very early in the 1950s, but it is slightly different from what I've just told you before. The Euregios on the continent at the border were really bottom-up initiatives of local stakeholders, whereas the countries of Scandinavia initiated cross-border cooperation first and foremost between states around, and mostly in order to talk about environmental questions, considering, for example, the Baltic Sea. But to this cooperation, municipalities were associated to complete the interstate Nordic cooperation on the ground. So when we now, these were the initiatives in the 1950s. I should have maybe added also that the first and most historical example of cross-border cooperation is something which has been very much studied by the historians in Europe. Are twin towns. Twin towns before the cross-border associations. These are not formalized corporations, but these are cooperation between mayors in Europe, not necessarily just at the border, in general, European mayors, but you can find them at the border where two mayors decide to set up cross-border cooperation. This is the first form of cross-border cooperation before the associations. In the 60s and 80s, what we have is, I would say, an expansion of these forms of associations in mainly Western Europe, because of course in Eastern Europe we have the Iron Curtain, so the eastern part of Europe is excluded from that cross-border cooperation. And there are a lot of different types of cross-border forums that are set up, and what characterizes them all, you can find them here on the map. You can find different colors here. These are different, so you can see the geography. There are different scales. They're differently. Sometimes they are more regional. Sometimes they are more local. Sometimes they also concern cooperation around geographical areas to protect the environment. So it might be a big area, but a small, let's say, institutionalization. So we have really different forms of, we call them forums of cooperation, because they are not really, they are not very much institutionalized, and they bring together local and regional stakeholders from each side of the border of different types. They can be regional authorities. They can also be other stakeholders, ministries, or just maybe just trade unions, or some economic actors like chambers of commerce, or different type of actors can actually come together and share this cooperation. And so what they basically do in these forums is to exchange information, but also to cooperate on common concerns. For example, to protect the environment, to facilitate the crossing of the border, to cooperate on cross-border work, for example. When we look at the European, now we have mainly, I've shown you the local and regional level of cooperation, which is functioning until the 1980s, largely in a parallel way to the national or European cooperation. So there's no link between these levels of governance. But in 1980, a first link, if you like, is created with the European level of governance. And it's not the European Union or European Community, but it is the Council of Europe, which is the European organization based in Strasbourg, the first European organization which was set up here in Strasbourg for European integration. And the Council of Europe had the specificity that from the 1950s onwards, they had a conference on local and regional authorities. And this conference associated local and regional stakeholders in Europe to talk about common interests. And one of the common interests was the problem of cross-border cooperation. So in fact, these stakeholders discovered that it would be very beneficial if there was a form of a European convention which would facilitate on a European level cross-border cooperation. They were therefore calling for a legal framework for cross-border cooperation. And this legal framework was given with the Madrid Convention in 1980, which was signed by the member states, or national states, not of course the local and regional authorities of the Council of Europe, and ratified. And it was called a framework convention because it was not directly effective. It's not EU law, which you can apply then directly in the EU countries, but it was a framework convention which was meant to initiate legal frameworks between bilateral or trilateral framework conventions or treaties, bilateral treaties between bordering countries. So basically, the Council of Europe invited its national states to conclude treaties in order to help the local and regional authorities to be able to do cross-border cooperation. It was legally not very effective, but politically very important, because it was the first time in history that on a European level, the phenomenon of cross-border cooperation on the local level was recognized.
As you can see, in fact, the European Commission became really interested in border areas only in the late 1980s, when the idea of a single market became a reality. And then they initiated a first experiment with 14 pilot projects supported by European funds. And these projects were mainly located in regions of the 6 founding states, in a context where border controls still existed, both for goods and for people. I will now talk about these Interreg programs because it leads to a real change in the approach of the European Commission and the European Union, which was founded in 1993. In fact, Interreg is a European program initiated by the European Commission, and it was developed in several phases. Okay? And the first Interreg period, which covers 4 years from 1990 to 1993, allows for the development of a framework that will be used in subsequent periods. The aim is, in fact, very simple. It is to involve local and regional actors in the framework of eligible regions, as you can see on the map. And the idea is to enable them to develop cross-border projects. What is an eligible region? There are not 3 areas separated by a land border, and it is a geographical principle. NUTS is a classification. It means nomenclature of territorial units for statistics. It is a hierarchical system for dividing up the territory of the European Union for the purpose of collection of development and harmonization of European regional statistics. And the NUTS level to which an administrative unit belongs is determined on the basis of demographic thresholds. So NUTS 3 are small regions, and in order to benefit from European program funds, cross-border cooperation projects must have several characteristics. On the one hand, you must have co-financing by different partners, so different actors involved, and you must have a balance with project leaders in each border territory. The European Union only provides funding if different partners are already committed, and they bring from 30% to much more, sometimes 70 and 80% of the financing of the project, depending on the geographical location. Management control is made by the member state and with the supervision of the European Commission. And a report must be drawn up by the program managers at the end of the project. During this period, in fact, 3 strands were initiated: cross-border, transnational, and interregional. Cross-border are initiated into this eligible regions. So it means you have contiguity of the territories, but you can also develop project at the transnational level. There are much bigger regions, which are more characterized by the idea of coherence in planning as topic like environment, transport, and you have more regional and sometimes states which are involved in this project. And the third one is interregional. It functions more as a network of cities, and you can have here several types of actors. In fact, the idea you have to keep in mind is that each period of this Interreg programs is bringing some innovation and is faced to new challenges. And one of them is very important. It is enlargement of new countries. For instance, Interreg 3 between 2000 and 2006 was faced to the enlargement of 10 new states, mainly located in Central and Eastern Europe, countries like Poland, Hungary, etc. And these countries benefited from a former program called FAR, which also took into account cross-border cooperation. During the Interreg 4 period, there was a major change because the name of cross-border cooperation was changed. It was named European Territorial Cooperation, and it became one of the 3 objectives of the cohesion policy, which is the largest budget of the European Union, more than 35% of the amount. In addition to the three strands ABC, new instruments were proposed to support the regional development of external border. And I will make you a short presentation on the next slide. New states were also joining the EU, Romania and Bulgaria. And that's why the European Union wanted to set up two new programs, pre-accession instrument and neighborhood instrument. Okay? And during the Interreg 5 phase, in fact, it was part of a new European 2020 strategy, which aims to promote smart and sustainable growth and a diverse and inclusive society. So you have on one side this new instrument which were developed. I don't go into details, but several programs were planned during this period between the EU and the candidate countries, especially countries located in the Balkan areas, in Southeast Europe, and now since the beginning of the 2020, new other countries around the Black Sea, like Georgia, Ukraine, etc. On the other side, you had this the development of the European neighborhood policy, and the objective of this policy is to prevent the EU's external borders from becoming a divide and to ensure that close relations can develop between the EU and its neighboring states. You had two partnerships, the Eastern Partnership on one side and the Mediterranean Partnership. And in fact, the Eastern Partnership was interrupted by the war between Ukraine and Russia. And the last Interreg program between 2021 and 2027 with new initiatives. In fact, you have 4 new aims, including a green zero carbon Europe, with the idea of a more competitive and intelligent Europe by promoting an innovative and intelligent economic transformation, a greener, low-carbon transition to a net zero carbon economy, and a resilient Europe. The third one is a more social and inclusive Europe, implementing the European social right floor. And the last one, to have a better governance, Interreg governance system. In fact, when you have a look at this map, which show you the evolution of the eligible regions of cross-border cooperation, you can see that there is that Interreg is now an original territorialization policy, which transforms state borders from dividing lines into interfaces. Okay, and cross-border cooperation, these border regions now cover around 40% of the European Union surface, and about 30% of the population. Okay. So, Birte, okay. And here you have a short table with the evolution of the programs and the evolution of the funding, which show a growth, a very rapid growth of the funding of the program.
Yeah, we would like now to zoom back to the local level of governance and give you a concrete example of cross-border cooperation. We take the example here of my cross-border area, which is between the city of Strasbourg and the city of Kehl. It's called the Euro District Strasbourg-Kehl. You can see here the area in red, and you can of course see also that there is a disparity between a rather strong, dynamic, big town on the French side and a smaller town on the German side. So how do these two urban areas cooperate with each other? Well, there is a history here again of the formation of the so-called Euro District, Bernard. In fact, the idea of a Euro district is something which has come up frequently in the history of cross-border cooperation. There were first initiatives in the 1990s. There was even an initiative already in the 1950s, but I will not go into that one. But in the 1990s, there were cross-border associations, and you can see here, this is the area, can you move just back? This is the area across the Rhine on the French and the German side. And in fact, there was a problem also of space planning on both sides of the river, because on the German side, it's a rather urban area with houses and nicely, you know, it's a nice nice gardens where you can walk and where the population goes very often. And on the French side, it was rather an industrial site with even a zone of no man's land, which was a little bit the policy of France after the Second World War, to keep as much as possible away from the Germans. And so in the 1990s, there was a cross-border association which invented the idea of a Euro district as a form of space planning district. The idea was to transform these rather diverging space planning on one side of the border into a more common and coherent living space. That was the idea. Now you can move on. But the problem with the idea was that it was had really difficulties to be implemented. There were several reasons for this. I would say I would just like to mention two main reasons. One was in the 1990s, simply, and this is always to take into account on the local level, on each side of the border, we had mayors who did not really get on with each other. They were of different political orientation, and the French mayor of the Communauté Urbaine was a little bit anti-German, so that was really a problem and an obstacle to do something together. But the second obstacle was also that the town of Kehl, which is a lot smaller, was very afraid of being, if you like, colonized by the town of Strasbourg. They feared that Kehl could become just a district of Strasbourg, which is not the same as a Euro district, where each national part should have an equal role in the cooperation. So on the local level, we have a lot of political, but also administrative, and I would say also financial, because there was also problem of financing obstacles to this Euro district. And in the end, the Euro district was initiated on the highest level of governance, meaning the national level. And this is interesting because this is very rare in cross-border cooperation. Normally things happen bottom up, but here we have a top-down development. In fact, what happened was, at the occasion of the 14th anniversary of the Franco-German Friendship Treaty, you can see here Gerhard Schröder and Jacques Chirac, the two heads of state and government from France and Germany. This festivity was organized in Strasbourg-Kehl, and they took the occasion on the bilateral level, on the binational level, to make a declaration in favor of the setting up of a Euro district, in order to put an example, to create maybe a Euro district between France and Germany as a first project, not only to do political and administrative cross-border cooperation, but to create really a common living space. That was the idea behind the Euro district. Okay, and so 2003 this happened, and here we have then the development of the of this Euro district. You can see here again on the map. If you look now at the map, you have the impression that the German side is more powerful because the German side on the right side of the Rhine is larger in geographical terms. I call this is another form of territorial diplomacy. In fact, it was to reassure the Germans that they would not become just a district of Strasbourg in order to enlarge. Here's the town of Kehl, you can see this, and they enlarged it to all the communes around Kehl, so that we have a much larger geographical area concern on the German side. And then you have the town of Strasbourg on the French side, and its community urbaine, so the surroundings are also included. Of course, this territorial diplomacy is only a diplomacy. It cannot hide the reality of a still very strong French partner on the French side and a weaker, smaller town on the German side. But still, the convention was then signed in 2005, and we have the Euro district was set up under the form of a European grouping for territorial cooperation, which is a new legal form. It's no longer just an association, which I explained earlier, which is very flexible in private law, but it's actually a public tool, but even a European tool. The European Union has created this legal form, which gives the Euro district the possibility to have a common legal framework for the institutions. And they did actually create institutions, a common secretariat, which was also as a form of diplomacy put on the German side in Kehl, where we already have other cross-border institutions. And the secretariat, there's also a common political council with on each side around 20 or 23 local politicians from each side of the border. And this EGTC has then developed until today many strands of activities that are not only, as I said, political activities, but activities in order to facilitate the life of the border lenders on both sides of the Rhine, to create, for example, facilities for sports, common sports events, or for cultural events, or to make it easier to cross the border also in physical terms, because one of the projects was also a new friendship bridge. So the Euro district has since then known a very dynamic development.
So I will, no. It's,
yeah, is that still yeah, this is just to complete it. Actually, I already said it. These are just, but maybe this is interesting for you in order to see really the governance structures. You can see it's really something which resembles a common governance structure. You have an executive board with 30 members, 15 from each side, a general secretariat. This is the location in Kehl. And you see that the municipalities included on the German and French side, they have tried to also make an equilibrium, 61 on the French and 51 on the German side. The executive board is a political board, of course, and you can see here that you have a lot of thematic cooperation also on bilingualism, mobility, environment, health, and maybe the drawback is that the budget which has been allocated to the Euro district has stayed rather modest. So in fact, they cannot do a lot of ambitious projects without the help of the European Union, and that means Interreg. Bernard.
I will now talk about a concrete project, which is a very original one, and which was implemented by the community urbaine of Strasbourg on one side and the city of Kehl. It is the two-shore garden. In fact, in 1990, the city of Strasbourg and the German city of Kehl launched an international competition to develop a vast area made up of industrial wastelands and partly abandoned port areas. and a new urban project called the Strasbourg-Kehl axis was proposed for urban development on both sides of the Rhine. In 1998, Michel Krieger, who was a painter and member of the Strasbourg City Council, launches the idea of creating a garden over the Rhine. Okay? And this garden should have a symbolic dimension, as it would be located on both banks of the Rhine, which is the border between France and Germany in this area. And the two parts would be connected by a bridge to be built, and which is intended only for pedestrians and cyclists. In 1999, Strasbourg and Kehl jointly applied of the state of Baden-Württemberg, so the German federalist state, to organize a landscape art festival in 2004. And the organization of this festival, which lasts 6 months, enables them to obtain funding from various bodies, and of course including Interreg, to create the green spaces and to build the bridge. So in 2004, they created this green area, the two shore gardens, and the pedestrian cyclist bridge was also inaugurated and linked the two banks. So here you have a map of this green area, but even if the creation of this garden seems to be a success, in reality, the story was a little bit more complicated, because there have been changes in the initial project, particularly in the French part, due to the change in the municipality council in 2001. For example, the bridge, you see that the bridge is located in the middle of the garden. In fact, in the first project, it was located at the bottom, down in the southern part of the garden, and it has to show a circle, which the circle is of course a symbol of the German-French reconciliation. Okay? So it's this garden is now a very important place. It is very popular in spring and in summer, especially the playgrounds on the German side for children and their parents. It is the whole garden is now a cross-border place for recreation, and it enable the development of a new centrality in the whole urban area. And it is also a place with a strong symbolic dimension, as it symbolizes, of course, the Franco-German reconciliation, and thus appears as a representative place of European integration, which allows to overcome national and antagonisms. So the emergence of a new multifunctional urban district, of which the garden is a key element, of course, is something very interesting and important. Maybe a short comment also on what happens during the COVID-19 pandemic, because it has real impact on cross-border cooperation. Okay? In fact, in March 2020, each state decided unilaterally to restrict crossing at its national borders, not always with the same countries, and the closures were not made sometimes at the same time. And under the Schengen Convention, states normally must inform the Commission and must provide an argument which was made, but all the states didn't use the same argument to close the border. So it means that during the first containment, travel within the EU was therefore severely restricted, and that there were a profound disruption of cross-border relations. It also hurts the cross-border cooperation because sometimes the structure and the framework were ignored by the decision of the state, and sometimes it was very difficult for the institution to make themselves heard by the national level. But what was very positive is that the resumption of certain interactions remain through personal relationship, which were established in the framework, of course, of cross-border cooperation. So there were exchange of patients in this cross-border regions, and the mayors and the board on local level played a very important role to help to the coordination. During the following crisis and the following containment, in fact, you had a better coordination between the states, but difficulties of crossing remained very strongly, yeah. And of course, the health measures were sometimes very different between the states. But maybe Birte can give you an example of what she lived in the Franco-German area of Strasbourg-Kehl.
Yeah, maybe I mean we can as a conclusion, what we wanted to say is that with the crisis, especially the COVID, but not only the COVID crisis, you got the impression that with rebordering there was a step backwards from this process, which we've just shown to you, of more cross-border integration and of opening up borders of mobility, of making the border, in fact, invisible in a cross-border region in Europe, something which you cannot easily do in other areas in the world because you still have a state border which is checked, but we normally don't have this, especially between France and Germany. And of course, during the COVID crisis, when the bordering was very hermetic, especially during the first lockdown in spring 2020, this created a traumatism because once you have integrated a cross-border region in Europe in the way that we have done here between France and Germany, you do not only create problems for cross-border workers or for the economy, if you like. In fact, during COVID, the goods and the lorries were always able to pass. But you also create problems for families that are kind of spread out on the territory on one side and the other of the border. And that makes the experience extremely traumatic, because if you advocate a common living space and then you introduce a border between the common living space, you feel, and that's what my daughter said at the time, because we are German, she said, well, Mama, it's like having a wall of Berlin drawn between us and the other side of the Rhine. So that's very interesting as a comparison. And maybe in conclusion, we have a lot worked also with Emmanuel. We have a lot worked in recent years, since the pandemic, on the capacity of resilience of cross-border regions in Europe, meaning the capacity from this first shock to react and to propose new tools of governance, cross-border governance, in order to avoid that in a new crisis, and we still do have crises, that there is not a disruption of the common living spaces again, and that we have a kind of also a risk aversion, that we can react in advance or very quickly, and react together and not nationally on each side of the border. But what we could see during COVID was that, in fact, the multi-level governance did not function at all. The main actors were the states, and it was national. And so the local level was could react, but it was there were problems of competence, of border closures, which was not their competence. And the European level could also try to react, but they did not have the competence of opening, closing the border either. So there was no consultation and no multi-level governance approach to managing the crisis. This is something that we should learn for the future. But of course, I mean, if you look at other crises, or even if you look at the war, for example, between Ukraine and Russia, you look at the borders, they're concerned. I mean, at a certain point of crisis, maybe you reach a point where it's no longer possible to maintain a cross-border living space. I mean, you will not find any single Ukrainian, Russian Euregio which is still alive at the moment. So there are also limits, of course, to this resilience. Thank you. I think we have finished. Bernard, do you want to add something?
Yes.
No? Yes, I think it's okay.
Well, you have the source of the document, and of course, this the short
And so
image.
maybe now, if you have first questions, we can open the floor.
Okay, very good. If we have questions or comments, we can do two ways. You can raise your hand, or you can use the chat and just say, I have a question, or you can write the question in the chat if your communication is not very good, or your connection is not very good. And remember, this is, in a way, I bring the academic review of the cross-border region, so you have a sense of how academics analyze the European success, and obviously not just success, all of the difficulties. And I think it's a really interesting way to reflect on the European experience, but also to think about how the European experience can, in a way, maybe provide ideas for policymakers on the ground elsewhere across the world. So I hope you have some questions. If you don't, what we can do is we could break for 10 minutes, and then we have the second lecture, which is much more on Brexit. And then we'll have the last hour of this session really just focus on a practicum where obviously all of you will be able to work on the specific questions. So if I have questions,
Tatiana,
I have a question from Tatiana online. So Tatiana, do you want to unmute and maybe raise your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. It was very interesting for me because I'm in this traumatized region. So was very happy to hear about your experience on reconciliation practicing. So my question would be, based on this rich experience of reconciliation practicing in Europe, would you suggest or advise briefly on main practical steps to start this reconciliation process? Just briefly summarize maybe what you already said, maybe you can add something. And then also maybe you can talk about what are the major obstacles, just also briefly, what are the major obstacles which are most evident in those reconciliation processes among those nations traumatized by war. So it's not only about maybe this Eastern European region, but it would relate to African region, like something like that. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I start and Bernard can follow on. I think Tatiana, I think the most important element in reconciliation is, and that I say that as a historian, it takes time. You need time. You cannot quickly reconcile. And so you have to take it slowly. And from the experience in Europe also, I mean, I think you also need to start reconciliation on several levels of governance. It can be done by the states, yeah. But the more important part is always the bottom-up process. And I can give you, I mean, the best example for the reconciliation is not really on the cross-border. The Euro district has started very late here in 2003. It's more the Franco-German Friendship Treaty from 1963 is a very good treaty because it has two parts. It has a political part, but it also has a part for the society. And what it actually provides for is that the young people from France and Germany reconcile by means of youth exchange, by education, by making them meet. And the young people have the advantage that often they are in the second row. They are not directly traumatized by the war or by the sufferance, and so it's easier to make them the generation of reconciliation. And so it needs education, it needs time, it needs also tools, finances. We have this youth, for example, Franco-German Youth Center, which is really good, and then you can double on the border also. You can then on the cross-border region you can also do complement these reconciliation processes on the ground. Sometimes this is more difficult. It can also sometimes be easier. It depends. But you need actually both. And then maybe, I mean, can give you the example also. We will talk about Brexit in a minute, but you have also in that border region, of course, Northern Ireland. You have a huge effort of reconciliation, and what worked there very well was not a bilateral treaty. Well, of course, there was a Good Friday Agreement, but it's not a Good Friday Agreement as such. It's the peace programs of the European Union which actually helped to give the finance and also to engage on projects of reconciliation. And I really think if you put all this together and the willingness also to on each side of a border to then engage also in school, in education, in families, to not teach hatred, but to teach, okay, let's forget there was a war, it was terrible, there was sufferance on each side, but now it's done, and now we have to kind of get over this and try and get on with each other. And the main objective for this is peace, so that it doesn't happen again. It's a long process, but it's not impossible.
Maybe I would like to add something, because I think if you want people, one of the major obstacles to my point of view is nationalism. And in fact, when you want to be in a peaceful part of the world, it means you have to develop a spirit of cooperation and of peace, which means you have to develop trust. And this is not very easy at the beginning, so it takes time. And it means you have to develop an approach of humility, which means you must fight against nationalism and say, I'm coming first, and I'm strong, I want this, and you are nothing. This can't work. So one of the main thing is to fight against stereotypes, against nationalism, and also to develop systems where people can meet together and see that the opposite side is not very different from our side. So it also means that you have to develop to learn languages, foreign languages, and several languages. So obstacles are still sometimes stay very, very hardly on the ground, and you have to fight the borders in the mind.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question answers. Thank you.
So,
I totally agree.
Thank you, Tatiana. We have a question in the room. David, take the floor.
Thank you. In your example, France and Germany are peers in their national size. In the case of a cross-border collaboration, you spoke of the need for parity there and equal participation and balance. Does that imply that cross-border collaborations like this are impossible, or they look very different when there's not that same balance? Is that a necessary ingredient?
I think I will start again and let Bernard complete. I think if there is an imbalance, I mean, there's not necessarily an imbalance, but if there is an imbalance, as we've shown in the case of Strasbourg-Kiel, it makes it more complicated, because imbalances are then linked to certain fears in terms of, you know, the urban area is that one urban area dominates the other. That's of course a problem, but you have also other imbalances on cross-border cooperation. This was a more geographical, or let's say, you know, from the urban development of a town, this criterion, but you can have other imbalances in cross-border cooperation in Europe, which are due to different state political systems. For example, if you said France and Germany are on an equal level, but if you do cross-border cooperation, no matter where you do it between France and Germany, they are not on an equal level when you look at the local and regional capacity to cooperate, because Germany is a federation like you have in Canada or in the States, but France is not. So the local and regional authorities in France do not have, they are disadvantaged with regard to the German Länder in order to do cross-border cooperation. So it's not necessarily always an obstacle to cross-border cooperation, but what you do have to do is, if in order to make it succeed, you have to know about these problems and these differences, and you have to take them into account whatever you want to do with a partner. If you don't take them into account, you risk to have a problem either for a project or for cross-border cooperation, political cooperation. You need to take them into account, and you need also to address them openly. I mean, there's no there is if you silence them, then they risk to come on the surface in a way to actually disrupt the cooperation. So it's better to talk about them and to make to create an equilibrium differently. We've shown it here. It was done geographically, or also in terms of equal representation in the political council. So these are means to create an equilibrium where it doesn't exist, and you have to try and do this a little bit. Yeah, Bernard.
Yeah, you're totally right. On one side, in fact, when you have a cross-border situation, you always have a type of unbalance. In fact, when you compare, for example, the situation between France and Luxembourg, France seems to be very powerful. It's a big country, 65 million inhabitants. Luxembourg is a microstate, 600,000 inhabitants. But when you're on the border, you see that Luxembourg is richer. The health is much more developed in Luxembourg. You have a lot of cross-border workers, and this unbalanced must be fight by governance. In fact, the governance in the governance systems, as Brite Wassenberg just said, you have to find a balanced representation on both sides. It's the case, for example, in Basel. In Basel, which is a city located in northwest of Switzerland, you have a cross-border cooperation on 3 countries, which was initiated during the 1960s. And in fact, the council of the Eurodistrict Trinational de Bâle, in fact, you have the same numbers of representatives in each part, from the 3 sides. Even if the Swiss part is much more powerful economically, politically, in fact, you have a balance. And what is very interesting also in Basel is that the Swiss part know that they are much more powerful than the other one, but they are always looking for a consensus, to develop a consensus of the ideas, and to involve the people, the French and the German representative in the board. So you have to, in fact, it's really the governance which help to find a balance.
Maybe just one thing to add, imbalances or disequilibriums at the border can also sometimes be an advantage. It can be actually at the source of wanting to do cross-border cooperation. If we take, for example, the cross-border cooperation Lille-Kortrijk, you have this powerful city of Lille, and around all the cross-border, the areas on the other side of the border in Belgium, they profit, in fact, from Lille as an employer, as a dynamic town. So imbalances are not just negative; they can also be one of the motivations in order to initiate cross-border projects or cross-border cooperation. But as Bernhard said, you cannot do it if Lille or if Basel or if a strong partner abuses and wants to dominate the others, and you create governance structures that are completely disequilibrated. That's not a solution for good governance. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Maybe so I have a brief comment, but that will not probably I need a reply. But it's Claire Guillemin, who's from she's managing she's a foreign affairs official. She's managing the relationship between Dominican Republic and Haiti, and she just says it is totally what we need on the border between Dominican Republic and Haiti, the spirit and approach of humility and fight against the nationalism. And Claire didn't want to add any comments to this. She has a connection issue, and so she's staying off, she's staying muted, and she also is only using the chat to interact with us. But I think it's interesting because she also says that, she's making notes, she's writing notes, and she thinks it's really interesting. So with this, maybe we take a break for about 10 minutes and then come back and do the second lecture.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll try to keep
how long? 10 minutes?
minutes?
10
10
15?
minutes.
10 minutes break
No,
or
10,
15?
10.
10,
10.
Okay.
So everybody will take a 10 minutes break now. So we come back at 25 to the hour sharp, and then we will have the lecture on the impact of Brexit, which, just to remind you, Birte published a couple of books on this. She edited a volume a few years ago. She's done a number of special issues, and I have worked with her on this. I will talk to you about the impact of Brexit on Customs UK. Which I think is quite interesting because I discovered that, it was kind of an unexpected outcome, if you want, of the Brexit that the British government had not realized they would be confronted with.